everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today I have a special visitor. You may remember her from our other videos, Mariana Rodriguez.
Hi, Brittany. I'm so excited to be here again. I know the last time we were together, we always talk about very interesting things, and I'm so happy that you guys could invite me again to record with you.
Of course, thanks for being on here, coming on here. So today we're going to talk about how foreigners, and in reality everyone, how we can all protect ourselves and how not to lose our home in Mexico. Let's say you finally bought your property or you're thinking about buying a property, and how to avoid the pitfalls of losing your house. For those of you who are new to the channel, Mariana is a real estate lawyer, and so she's going to tell us the ins and outs of how to protect ourselves from losing our home. So Mariana, what are some ways in which one could lose their home or their property?
This is a very important topic. You see them everywhere. It's because it happens, right? As a real estate agent and attorney, my job is not to scare you. I don't want to scare you into investing in Mexico, but it is important to know that just like in any country, there could be some things that if we're not careful, we could definitely either lose our home, like Brittany mentioned, or even lose our deposits, right? Because sometimes we want to buy things little by little or give a deposit, and in the end, it's money that we're losing, right? So we want to be careful with that. I think one of the big things that I've seen with clients, unfortunately, or with even family members, is where they don't take care of really checking on the property and kind of like the legal side of it before they even start with the purchase. We have in Mexico, for example, a lot of the Ejido, which is a very famous word now with investors, where you can buy land that was given to agricultural workers, and there could be some scams there. We also have, the point of not really doing the due diligence and not checking if the person who is selling you this property, especially if you do things from afar, if that they are the actual owners, full owners of the property, and then going through a process where they could evict you and different processes which could make you lose the house. And of course, we also have the pre-sales, where people buy little by little, which they can be very good, but of course it's a risk if you don't have the reputation of the developer, etc. So it's very important to make sure to have true legal advice. Of course, investigate a lot and make sure that this money is going to the right objective.
Yeah, that's so true, and especially with pre-sale, you see that all over. Can you explain to people who are watching the video what are some things that could happen with pre-sale if you're not careful with that, and what to keep in mind when you're maybe thinking about, oh, it's a good deal, maybe I should get the pre-sale?
For sure. Something that I personally have changed my mind a lot in that, if you follow me for some time in maybe the company's website or Instagram, I always, when I just was a lawyer, I would always say no pre-sale, no pre-sale. The reality is things change with time, economy changes, and honestly, pre-sale I think is one of the ways that people can invest in Mexico. Talking specifically about Mexico, really good developments for sure. But of course, there also comes the way that we need to be really careful. So, in reality, a pre-sale, and what we need to be careful about is it's always a risk. Why? Because you're investing your money in a project that is not yet built, right? If you are very honest with yourself, you're investing in something that's not real at the moment. So that can be a little bit scary. I've had other agents tell me, oh, I just show this property to the client and they send the money and that's it. And you get really excited because honestly speaking, investing in a home or something that to use later on for Airbnb or whatever is exciting, right? And sometimes we can get too excited and just think about, oh, it looks so pretty and they're promising me this and that. So we have to be really careful. I think one of the main things first is, and I would start with this, to understand pre-sale and the different stages in pre-sale. The first stage, normally, at least here in Yucatan, in the South, we call it friends and family. The friends and family stage is kind of like the earliest stage in a pre-sale, and it's like the best price you can find in the pre-sale. But that means that also the risk is higher because it's literally the first stage before even the developer launches this to market, right? So, what things to have in mind in those cases? Investigate the developer. No, there's many developers, and it's important to revise the reputation. Go online, check about them. What do people say about them? People that have invested there. My suggestion is always maybe to start with a developer that you see online that the reputation, according to other clients, is good, that there's no maybe legal problems or news about them doing something incorrect. The other thing would be, of course, to make sure the legal side of it, make sure that they have the documents ready, that the permits are least are somehow they have some permits to build or licenses, very important for them to have. Right now in Mexico, you can sign developers need to sign a contract that is inscribed at PROFECO. You can Google PROFECO, but pretty much it's the part of the government that makes sure that you as a customer of the developer are protected. So this contract that you sign with them that is uploaded into PROFECO, this one is the one that the developer should have, making sure they have all the permits needed, making sure that your rights as the customer are protected. So like these things would make a pre-sale safer in a sense. And of course, if this developer has made other projects before, maybe you can even travel and go visit that project, see, the finishings. This is more on the side of how it looks, right? See the finishings. What did they promise? What did they deliver? What was the timing in which they delivered? So definitely it is something that I think is worth it. If you go a little bit more in the stages of the pre-sale, it will get more expensive, but there's less risk, right? The more it's close to delivery, the more expensive it will be, but also the less risky. But it's always a good thing to look into as long as you have those things in mind. The permits that they should have, the reputation, and things they've delivered before. And this is almost impossible. I think you will agree with me if you don't have somebody local that knows about them, Normally realtors or lawyers are closer to them. They know how they work. They know if there's some kind of gossip going around that they're not doing their job, they will know. So that's always good to have in mind.
Yeah, that's so true. And so how does your company, Max Life Yucatan, how does your company help people when they're thinking about maybe buying pre-sale or things like that? What are some of the steps that you guys take to help your clients?
So I think the due diligence is a little bit further, goes a little bit further. I think one of the main things that we try to do with the clients is look, you can put some money down to separate the property, but normally developers, even though you put this money as a down payment, they will give you some days to look at, the legal documents. So, okay, if you like the property, put the down payment, tell the developer that you want your lawyer. This is what we do at MaxLife to revise the documentation. So when we make the first contact with the developer, we normally search them online. If we don't know them, because maybe we already know them, but if we don't know them, we search them online, we look at news, we try to make sure like what is their reputation. The second thing we do is we ask for those documents, and in communication with the developer, we try to ask about the permits. For example, one really big thing right here, at least in the South, is condominium regime. So, like the HOAs. A lot of the developers don't have those ready. I've only seen one, which I work closely with them, that has all the HOAs ready, which is crazy, incredible. But most of them don't. So, we ask them, okay, how is this going? What are your plans regarding this and that? Once we do that due diligence, then we'll let you know the report. We'll let you know if they are the owners, what we legally think of it. And if you're okay with moving on, then we ask them to send us the promissory contract of sale. So this is a document where you promise to buy this on this pre-sale, and they promise to sell as long as you both comply with the obligations. And this is the one that I was saying has to be registered with PROFECO. Why? Because this authority is going to be the one that, before they approve this contract, they double check that all the requirements or your rights are as a consumer are protected. So we get this contract, we revise it, we let you know our comments, and then now with all that diligence in mind, you can make an informed decision, based on all of this. And depending on the pre-sale, this may take a few years that you pay little by little, a little bit before that is over, before your final payment. Then we can help you again to finalize before a notary your sale, which I think we've talked about this before in other videos, but there's some restrictions for foreigners. So we can help you with that process as a law firm to finalize that step and become the full owner of the property.
Okay, very good. You mentioned PROFECO. For some of our viewers who may have never been to Mexico and are thinking about moving to Mexico, they may not know what PROFECO is. Could you help explain that to everybody? What is PROFECO?
So in short, PROFECO is an institution, part of the government, which is the one in charge of protection of the consumers. Okay? This is not only in real estate. This is also, for example, if a store, a convenience store, or Liverpool, if you know a little bit of Mexico, they're selling products. Anything that is against a consumer, they normally regulate this. And for example, if you sign a contract for pre-sale with a developer and they don't comply with the contract, Profeco, this institution, acts to reach a settlement between the parties. So like they literally sit you down per se and say, okay, so who didn't comply? If they didn't comply, here's a fine for you. They can fine them, and also, reach a settlement so that both parties are okay. If you don't reach that, then Profeco asks you to go to court. They're not a court per se, but they try their best to make sure that your rights are protected. And if you did sign a pre-sale contract registered with Profeco and is not being really going along with the terms, you can definitely reach out to them or with a lawyer, and they can help you.
Okay, thanks so much for explaining that. So let's say someone's listening to all of this and they say, wow, that sounds like a lot of steps. I don't want to do any of that. I just want to go right ahead. What could happen to someone who just jumps into a pre-sale, into buying a pre-sale?
When we hear of somebody that things didn't go well, and then we say, oh man, I wish I would have, listened. I think there's no better way of learning than hearing of other people's experiences. I mean, if you go online, you hear about plenty, but I definitely have one that I always use in the interviews because I think it's one that really made me sad. I had a couple of clients that reached out to me once they had, given their down payment regarding a property. And they were really excited because, as you know, we also do immigration. So we were helping them with the immigration side and everything. And they asked us, Mariana, we don't live here in Merida. We don't live here. We already, started paying this pre-sale. They were supposed to deliver 2 years ago. This was 2 years ago. 2 years ago. And we visited and there's like no roads. And just to be clear, right? There's pre-sale for lots and there's pre-sale for houses. Well, this was a pre-sale for a house and not even the street was like cleared up. And of course, they were asking my opinion, and I was like, well, this is very weird. Like, there's no way they're going to deliver a property in a couple of months that doesn't even have a road, right? So, anyway, I went with them in various meetings with the developer to try to understand what was going on. There was promises made. Of course, we tried to be able to communicate with the developer as much as possible, try to legally make them comply, but nothing. After a while, it turns out, they did this Zoom. We all went in the Zoom. It was a Zoom that those Zooms that don't let you comment. You just see the person, which was really sad as well because, people wanted to know what was going on. Nothing. After that, I passed them to a litigation attorney. Of course, you can imagine all the money they had spent in lawyers up to that point. And turns out a few months after, all the people who didn't have their property delivered, made this collective plea at court. And then a few months later, in national TV, it used to be a few years back, the president of Mexico, in a morning news report called La Mañanera, they start talking about this topic, and this person that was there starts telling the president, well, this has become a full on scam for nationals and foreigners, many people involved, which of course they never got their house delivered. So, I mean, in short, this is what can happen if you are not doing your due diligence with pre-sales. If it can happen with houses that are already built, and if it can happen with individuals, pre-sale is always a risk, but it doesn't have to be the highest risk if you do your due diligence. And if they would have done that, maybe they would have been able to tell a different story. So if you are thinking of that, I would just say, look, due diligence is always good before making a decision. It's not expensive to do, and in the end, this is for the long run the best. So yeah, that would be my little story, my little horror story.
Thank you for sharing. So we talked about pre-sale. Let's go back to talking about Ejido land. Can you tell everybody what is Ejido land?
Yeah, for sure. So Ejido land, I would say, is one of the main things that our clients ask us in the real estate company, and also at MAXLIFE, where they want to see this as an opportunity. So in short, to explain Ejido land, this is a type of land that was given right after the Mexican Revolution to certain agricultural workers. And this was so that they would use this property that was not a private property, first of all. It's just that they would use it for agriculture, for their family, etc. But it cannot be sold. Okay, it's part of a it's a communal land. Okay, it has its own law, it has its own court, so it's definitely separate to private property. Right now, and after many years, due to cities growing and growing and taking really parts of land that now belong to little communities, which is normal, this is everywhere in the world, they start developing and they start asking the ejidatarios, which is these people that have, I would say, have the usage of this land, to sell the properties. And in short, ejido land cannot be sold. That's like the short answer. It cannot be sold. For it to be sold, it has to be regularized. What regularized means, and the steps to regularize a property, is, let's say that I talk to an ejidatario. This is one member of the group that has the usage of this land. I talk to one of them and he tells me, you know what? Yeah, I'll sell you this piece of land. Okay. Well, first of all, what is that piece of land at the moment? Is it still just a parcel? Is it still just a piece of land that you use? Or is it now your full usage in your name? If it's not the full usage in his name, then you have to go to certain steps. Like, for example, one of them is having an assembly with all of the other members and then being in agreement to make this land directly from that person. Once that happens, then you can regularize the land and it can become a private property. Once you get to that point, that now we do go to civil law, to like any other property, then that person can sell you the land. So again, in short, ejido cannot be sold, but with the right steps, you could, or that person really could regularize it and sell it to you.
Let's say a foreigner doesn't know that they didn't do research and just bought an Ejido property. What could the government or the Ejido community, what could they do to that family or that individual that did that?
Oh, super interesting, and has happened. So this is one of the things where you could definitely lose your money. And I say money because, people would think, well, I'm losing my property because I bought this. We signed the contract. he sold me this, like we were in agreement. And although that is in a way how a contract works, when it comes to properties in Mexico, you always need to make sure that you understand that the only way that someone can sell you a property, a piece of land in Mexico, is going through a notary. And for that property to be that sale to be registered at the public registry of property and commerce. Okay? So first of all, if you just signed the contract with that person, you paid them, they say yes, it's yours, no problem. The reality is, because he couldn't sell this to you because it wasn't a private property, then what can happen is the other ejidatarios, or the other people that own those lands, could do a meeting and just, sell this land to somebody else correctly. If they do that, then that means that whatever contract you signed just wasn't real. It wasn't real because what they sold you was a right that could not be sold. And I actually do have an example of this. This actually happened to a family member. They were trying to do things correctly. Okay, they were trying to buy a piece of land that was an ejido. They had met with the person that had the usage of that land, and they were going to do the assembly. Okay, but at the same time, the other members had promised to sell this to a foreign company. So what happened was, in the end, both the foreign company and my family member lost their money because they promised to sell this to both of them. So again, if you're a foreigner and you want to buy an ejido, in short, I would say as a lawyer, you can't. But if you take the next steps, it's a possibility. You need to make sure to ask if the ejido parcela in Spanish, is already dominio público, public domain. That ejido has the public domain. If he doesn't, you can give some kind of down payment, but you have to make sure to have a lawyer help you so that you can do an assembly, or they can do an assembly where they all vote that they are in agreement for that ejidatario to sell you this property. Once you pass through that stage, then this ejidatario cannot run away. He has to also go with you and regularize this property at court. And then once he regularizes it, then you go with the notary, and then you can pay the property off, and then it will be under your name. So yes, you can buy it, but as long as it becomes a private property, that all this process was, the property was regularized, and you have a lawyer with you that makes sure that the hidatario or the group in general doesn't do a scam and just takes your money away from you.
Once the property is regularized, does that mean that it is no longer considered to be a ejido? That once you buy it, you can go and sell it to anyone?
Exactly. Yes. That's like the perfect stage of doing it. And even, they've gone through the assembly, and this ejidatario already has the domain. That is already a huge advancement, because at least now you're just dealing with this person and not the whole community, right? So it's really important. Actually, myself, I actually work with, it's called in Spanish, a lawyer that does agrario. That's like the kind of law, because it is different to like just private law, which I practice. So it's very important to have someone knowledgeable that can, deal, because this is people that, it's sad, but maybe it's people that don't have education. Sometimes they cannot read. It's a kind of law that has to deal with a lot of emotions, a lot of fights between families. So, I mean, I'm being really honest here because it is important, and people need to know this, that it is possible, but with the right guidance.
Because if you don't go through the proper channels, they could kick you out, right? You could just lose the home.
Sometimes people think, oh, I'm going to start building, we already signed that it's going to be mine, and that's it, like it's not, as long as it doesn't go through a notary the right way, I would suggest, it's not really yours. And yes, you can definitely lose it.
So another way that someone could lose their home is by buying a property in a protected area, right? That's another way?
Yeah, for example, talking about pre-sales, right? Because this really happens a lot of in pre-sales. One of the due diligence items that we normally have to do in a pre-sale is checking with the developer what kind of permits they have. And one really important one is the one given by PROFEPA, which sounds a lot similar like PROFECO, but it's different in a sense that it's also an institution from the government, but it protects more the environment. So it just makes sure that you are protecting the environment when you're developing. So it could be that at some point when you're, paying for this pre-sale or giving your down payment, they say, "Oh yeah, no worries, it's fine." But they need to show you that they have all these permits, not only a construction permit, not only what type of usage of you'll have if it's commercial or residential or whatever, but that they are protecting the environment. Because if this is not in a sense correct, or they didn't do the investigation right before even offering a pre-sale, it could be that in the future before they deliver there could be a problem, and then the government doesn't allow them to keep building or developing. So that could also cause you to lose your money. So it's one of the due diligence items that is really important to make sure that you take care of, that you ask your lawyer to ask the developer. And especially because in Mexico there's a lot of protected areas, like at least where I am based in Yucatan. Most of the north has, areas that have the mangroves and birds and this and that. So you want to make sure that also, even in a moral sense, that you're not, buying a pre-sale in a part of the country or of the state that could be affecting the environment.
In other ways, and I know we've talked about this in another video, but about foreigners buying properties near the border or by the ocean, what could happen if they don't do things right? What are the steps that someone needs to take if they want to buy a property there?
So I think that the topic of the restricted zone has become more and more well known. I would say that's something that really makes me happy, because I think is one of the ways that both developers and foreigners have come to understand how foreigners properly buy in Mexico, which before it was like, what? Like bank trust? Like, what's that? So I'm really happy that now more and more we find like that fideicomiso in Spanish, bank trust mention. There's a restricted zone, which, if you look in the Mexico map, it's from 50 kilometers from the ocean down or inwards as a fringe around Mexico, and 100 kilometers inward from any borders that touch Mexico. It's called a restricted zone. Okay. And what our main law mentions is that no foreigner or foreign company can directly own those lands. So there are different methods of purchasing. I do think that it depends on what your plans are for the future. But there is the bank trust and there is the Mexican company. Now, one of the things that I've seen it to be a problem, and it could cause more than I think you lose the property once you buy it, but that it could cause that you don't end up buying or you lose your money in the process, is that you don't explain correctly which method you want to use. And this happens more and more with resales, when an individual is selling you a property, because developers, most of them, they know that this is a requirement. It's always good to double check with them, but they know already. But for example, with an individual, normally they don't know that this is a requirement. So, for doing a bank trust or a Mexican company to purchase, this elongates the time that the closing process will take. So, for example, if you sign a document, you give a down payment, and you promise that you're going to be closing at the notary in 1 month, but your process takes longer, then it's not going to be possible. It's not going to be possible. So it's very important to make sure to have a lawyer, or involved, or somebody that knows about the process, to be able to standardize the times and be like, okay, in our condition this could take up to 6 months. Do you understand, seller? Yes, I understand. Okay, let's write it down, let's sign it. This protects your money, it protects the down payment, it also protects the property, because they're going to wait for you. You're not going to lose the property in a sense, but you're going to do it the right way. So I always suggest to make sure you understand your best way of buying, but also make sure the seller understands what it involves in a sense, right? And yeah, I mean, this is really important. Something also that a lot of people don't know, talking about the restricted zone, and this has actually happened to one of our clients, unfortunately, as well. If you buy outside of the restricted zone, you still need to get a permit. It's not as a bank trust, but it is called a convenio de renuncia. Yes. You do it before the Secretary of Foreign Affairs, where you tell the government that although you do not need a bank trust or a Mexican company, you will renounce the help of your government regarding this property. And what happens is also lack of knowledge. It has come where both parties sign at the notary, everything is okay, and then nobody told the foreigner they had to do this process. So what happens now is that when the notary wants to go and register your title to make you a full owner, they don't have this. And they have a certain time to register this. So it's also little things that I feel like the knowledge of knowing how it works and making sure you get the right help, it can prevent you from losing that down payment, or losing any money, or the property, because in the end we're going back to it. You have a dream to have that property. It's something you want and something maybe you've imagined yourself being in there. So this is just to protect that.
And guys, if you would like to learn more about buying a property in the restricted zone, check out this video right here. So let's go back to talking about renouncing help from the US. Can we talk more about that? What does that mean?
This is something that even if you have bought through a bank trust, there's so many clauses in that title. But one of the clauses actually says you are renouncing the help of your government in anything that has to do with that property, both inside the restricted zone or outside. So what that means is that, this whole concept of the restricted zone and all of that was made years ago, way before computers, internet, etc. It was made to protect the places in Mexico that, were more subject to being invaded. There was boats, so like you would come through the ocean and invade, or through the borders. So having no foreigner buy or be an owner in those properties would protect the country. Of course, now that's not the case. But it's really important to know why, because that's when we understand why are we renouncing. Well, that's one of the reasons. It's to protect the country, first of all. And what they mean is, it doesn't mean that you cannot go to court in Mexico. Maybe there was something that was wrongly done to you, or there was an eviction or whatever. You can go to court and go through all this process, no problem. But what they don't want you to do is to internationally say, okay, you know what, United States, this is going on with the government in Mexico. They're being discriminatory, this and that and that. That you cannot do. With properties in Mexico, you are treated as a Mexican. This can be positive in a way, because you are subject to courts here, in a sense that they know more about the legal side. I mean, really, courts or other countries couldn't really do a lot with Mexican laws. But also, in general, remember that this is to protect Mexico. So even if it doesn't sound completely great, it is something that is that way, because it is to protect a country from foreign investment. So in that sense, yeah, it doesn't mean you cannot go to court and fight for your rights. It just means that here in Mexico.
Hey, thanks so much for explaining that to us. Okay, so let's talk about how can we make sure that the seller understands all of this stuff.
It's always easier, of course, to have someone like talking the language, first of all, but also the legal language, kind of like explaining this to them. I would just start by mentioning, if you don't really have a lawyer at the moment, by just mentioning that you are a foreigner, of course, and that you know that there's a restricted zone and you're going to buy through, for example, a bank trust. I think at least by saying that, if the person has a realtor, or if they are a developer, normally they would kind of know, oh, okay, yeah, the bank trust, blah, blah, blah. Then you need some time. It's nothing like having a lawyer explain it to them, right? But I think that if you know already what you want to use, whether it's a bank trust or a Mexican company, it's always good to mention it up front to the person. In touristic areas like Yucatan, Puerto Vallarta, those things are, I think, more normal. Like developers would know, oh yeah, fideicomiso. They even have already like the standardized process for that because it's business for them. They don't want to lose it. But in a sense, it's always good to go ahead and say it first. Or if you do have a lawyer, tell them to help you find the best strategy and then have them explain that to the seller so that in the end, this is all in written. In the promissory that you sign, any document you sign, they know that this is going to be your way of purchase.
So, what are some things that your company does to help clients? We've talked about several different things, but how do you protect your clients from falling into these pitfalls that we've mentioned?
I am a certified real estate agent. So when I go through that, I try to include the legality of things. So even from before trying to find a property for the person, I really try to make sure I understand like those needs and then like what they want to do in the future. So like through those meetings we have before we even look for a property, I really the team really tries to understand that to be then able to find properties that fit your needs as a foreigner, including a developer or a person who understands how a foreigner buys, right? If I'm acting as a lawyer, which also it happens sometimes, same thing. I do try to first have a meeting with you, even sometimes before you find the property, just to make sure that you understand the method of purchase. I've actually had some meetings with people where they tell me, Mariana, I do want to purchase in the future, maybe in a year or two. I'm not ready to start looking yet, but I do really just want to understand what the process is. Like, what's the best for me? What is involved? What do I have to prepare to be ready? And so we can have a meeting with you to go through those things to make sure that you're ready for when the time comes. And when we act as real estate agents, kind of like that is already involved. We already bring all these lawyer benefits into it because I think in both they're really necessary. And in the end, it's accompanying you, right? So making sure that every step you take, it is going to be your decision in the end. Like we're going to tell you all the options there are, and but you don't have to do it alone. So yes, there's so many steps, but don't worry, we're gonna go through them one by one. And if there's something that I really don't think suits you, I will definitely tell you, like, it's up to you, but I just don't think it suits you. So it's part of that, being really honest with the client. It's all personalized. You can't really fit. And sometimes clients do ask me that, like, do you have like a process and how it's going to be? Yes, I can explain to you a little bit, but we really like to personalize it to the client. If you haven't chosen a property, we try to help you find it. If you already chose one, but you're not sure if everything is okay, we can do a title search, a due diligence. Like we can guide you no matter what step you are in. But of course, the best thing is always if you can start way beforehand, because that way you come with that knowledge in mind, and you don't waste your time, if that makes sense. So that's what we can do.
Right, because nobody wants to waste their time.
Yeah, time's money, so precious.
It is. So, Mariana, what is the difference between a notario and a lawyer?
Great question. So I think it is one of the things that depending of your home country, it can be very different. But in Mexico, the notario, notary in English, is a lawyer, but in a higher sense. Okay, why? Because the notary by law or notario is the only one that, for example, can give faith of legal acts being done in Mexico. So like if you are going to do a power of attorney, it has to be before a notary. And specifically regarding sales of properties, if you don't go through a notary, this is property, not any type of property, like real estate. If you don't go through a notary, they are the ones that can give faith that it happened and can register your title. So if you don't go through one of them, you're losing your property. It has to be with them, okay? Now, when it comes to the notary, for example, I know in the United States, normally, somebody explained it to me this way, and I really understood it. In the States, you have like a law firm and they have notaries. In Mexico, you have a notary, which is, again, a lawyer. They have to go through tons of exams after being a lawyer. And then once one dies, then you can maybe go through the spot. So it's really difficult to become one. But then what happens? Notaries have lawyers that work for them, okay? That normally bring in their clients and, they give the notary a commission, blah, blah, blah. Or they just do the work for the notary and the notary signs, okay? Now, what's the difference between having your own lawyer or the notary? Because sometimes it has happened to me where the developer just says to the client, "Don't worry, like we'll see all the legal side, you just go and sign, no problem." And maybe if it's a really good developer, that's okay. But when it comes to knowing that somebody's looking for your like interest completely as you are the client and they will always go to you first, there's nothing like having your own lawyer apart from the notary. And the reason is the notary has to be very neutral, okay? Like I said before, there are notaries that are very involved in their cases. But sometimes you have 20 lawyers and they're doing all the legwork and all the projects, and you just have to go and sign. So sometimes there are notaries that have been subject to investigation. This has a lot to do with developers, but subject to investigation due to not doing things right or just signing anything they give them, okay? Which is very subject to scams. And also, they will be neutral. They will both help the developer and help you and then show you the project and that's it. But did you pay to the right account? They don't know. Did you investigate that that was the right property for you? They don't know. Did they respect what they were going to give you in the end? They don't know. They're just giving faith to you are selling this, you are buying this, you receive the money. That's good. Let's register your title. So I would say if it's someone, a developer that you trust already, maybe it's your second or third purchase with the same person, or you have a real estate agent involved which knows a lot about law, it's okay. You can use the notary lawyer. But if you really want somebody to take you by the hand, really have in mind your interest and help the real estate agent to make sure you're protected, having your own personal lawyer is always good. So I think that would be the main difference. It's always nice to have somebody, again, look out for your interest as the client.
So it's good to have both a lawyer and to go, of course, have to go through the notario.
Yes, it's important. Notario is like always, but if you do have a personal lawyer that looks out for your own interest, it's even more protected in a sense. People think, "Oh, the notary will do its job," and they think that, and then in the end, the notary does a mistake. And for example, it happens. I'll give you an example where maybe it was a marriage that bought the property, but only one of them was in the title. You have to make sure both sign, not just one. So, like those kind of details, sometimes it has happened. It's not usual, but it has happened where the notary is not careful. Or when you sign a promissory and you don't put there that you're going to do it through a trust because you're a foreigner. And then the seller says, "No, you didn't tell me before." And that could, it's not like you're losing the property, but yes, you are, because you're not going to be able to purchase it and you're going to lose your money. So those two I would focus more on, like foreigner side.
So how should someone who's watching the video who wants to contact you, how should they go about contacting you?
Yeah, for sure. So we have, the Instagram, which is at MAXLIFE Yucatan. I actually personally started a project called that in Instagram. You can find it at Mariana in Yucatan. And this is more on the real estate side. And as a lawyer, I try to make content just to make sure that it's easier for people to invest in Yucatan and also know about some cool things to visit. So if you want to check that out, we also have the website, which is maxlifeyucatan.com.mx. And I'm going to give Brittany the phone number so that you can also text us, no problem. But make sure you let us know how you found us. And if you came through chasing the American dream, let us know as well.
Well, thanks, Mariana, for going over all of this information with us and helping us to see how we can protect ourselves and the steps needed to make sure that we don't lose our home in Mexico. And I will be putting Mariana's contact information down in the description below. And if you're in the Yucatan, Nauru, you can contact Mariana and she will try to help you with if you have any questions or things like that, if you want to use MAXLIFE Yucatan. Mariana, thanks for being on here. Thanks for your time and everything. Don't forget to like and subscribe to see more content like this. That's it for today, everybody. And until next time, bye.
Bye.